Israeli forces have launched a new offensive on the Jabalia refugee camp in northern Gaza. Residential areas and shelters for displaced families have been reportedly targeted, and several people have been killed. Israel is stepping up attacks in the southern areas of Gaza. The army has ordered tens of thousands of Palestinians to leave eastern Rafah. The UN says around 150,000 people have already fled the area. To discuss this, I'm joined by Diana Buttu, Palestinian lawyer and former legal advisor to the Palestine Liberation Organization. It's great to have you in the studio for once. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you.
As a lawyer, is it legal to displace civilians again and again and again? And I could add 10 agains.
Absolutely not, unless the displacement is done in a way that is legal, meaning that they are providing shelter, they're providing adequate medical care, they're providing water, they're providing electricity. What Israel's been doing is just dropping leaflets on Palestinians. Yesterday they dropped leaflets in the north telling people to flee to the south, and then in the south they're telling people to flee to the north. So you have this situation in which they haven't provided even the basic necessities of life, and so this can hardly be called legal. This is entirely illegal.
I ask you this because, I think our viewers will be familiar with the idea that there have been many breaches of international law committed by the Israeli forces in the Gaza Strip for months now. And we understand you can't indiscriminately bomb civilians. We've discussed this on air many times. There are places that should be protected, hospitals, schools, etc. The threshold to attack those places legally is very high. But something we've perhaps discussed a little less, which is extremely relevant today, is you also can't just displace hundreds of thousands of people.
That's right. And in their displacement of them, they haven't been providing the basic necessities of life. It's important to keep in mind that not every person is able-bodied. Not every person has the ability to be fleeing. You're talking about people who have been injured, traumatized, and Israel has done absolutely nothing to make sure that there is a place for them to go. Not just that, the other thing that they've done is when they tell people to flee, they've actually been shown that they're bombing those areas that they've told people to flee to. So there is no safe space in Gaza, and I think we do a huge disservice if we somehow think that there is no place in Gaza safe at the moment.
Staying in the legal world for a second longer, we know there's a case against Israel at the International Court of Justice. The ICJ has already said there's plausibly genocide going on here in the Gaza Strip. Now South Africa, which had brought the case initially, is asking for additional emergency measures to be imposed by the court. Basically, they're asking the court to tell Israel to stop this. Do you even want... It feels like all of this is happening in a parallel world because it has zero impact on the ground. Do you even watch these legal developments anymore?
I do. I do watch these legal developments because although they may seem like they aren't worth anything, these legal developments are going to lead into long-lasting legal developments. For example, it's through these courts that we can then be pushing for arms embargoes to be against Israel. It's through these courts that we can be pushing for sanctions, and it's through these courts that we should be pushing for boycotts and for divestment. The legal aspects alone, we know that the U.S. is going to do everything to try to stop those legal maneuvers, but the U.S. doesn't control the world, and there are other countries that do believe in a rule of law and the system of law, and it's that system that we have to be pushing forward, not this idea that might is right.
Okay, so you are watching this closely, but more for the long-term consequences then. So let's talk short-term. What do you think is Israel's endgame here?
Israel's made it clear what its endgame is: genocide and ethnic cleansing. And the fact that...
Well, they obviously wouldn't put it that way.
They've put the genocide part very clearly. They've made enough statements of genocidal intent and the ethnic cleansing. Within the first week, on this very program, they indicated that they wanted to see Palestinians going into the Sinai. They indicated they want to see a smaller Gaza Strip, fewer in numbers as well. That equals ethnic cleansing.
Yeah, but as you know, they've changed the reason I interjected is because now Israel has changed its public messaging. They are saying at every press conference that they have, they're saying we are trying to, limit casualties to civilians, limit damage to civilian infrastructure, et cetera, et cetera.
And yet they still continue to bomb schools. They still continue to bomb hospitals. 30 of 36 hospitals have been bombed. The line that they say to the public is very different than what we see on the ground. And what we see on the ground is genocide.
Okay, so back to the end game. What does Israel want to achieve? Because there's still 1 million civilians left in Rafah city.
Correct. And that's exactly what they're trying to get at, is they want to make life so miserable that Palestinians end up eventually leaving, whether it's right now or in the future.
Leaving, you mean out of the Strip or within the Strip?
Out of the Strip entirely, in its entirety. This is what they want to see, and they've made their desires very, very clear. We're even talking about people who are now saying they're going to rebuild the settlements in the Gaza Strip. So All of it is clear in terms of what it is that they want. The question is whether or not we're believing them. And the international community continues not to believe Israel, even though Israel's made its intentions very clear and has followed those intentions with actions.
Militarily, this does not seem to be going well for Israel. I'm no military expert, but they're backfighting, fierce fighting, we're told, in Jabalia, in the northern part of the Gaza Strip, which they said that they cleared months ago. And
That's
clearly
right.
Hamas has a pretty impressive, remarkable ability to just come back where they were supposed to have been defeated.
And even more than that, it's been made clear to the Israeli public that there will not be any Israelis released unless there is a ceasefire. And this is why you're now seeing that there are demands for a ceasefire. Does that mean that they don't want to pulverize Gaza? The answer is no. The vast majority of Israelis do believe in continuing to pound Gaza. But militarily, as you said already, this is not going in their favor.
So since you mentioned the ceasefire, do you think that the expanding ground offensive in Rafah, along with the fighting in Jabalia, could also be used by Israel as a bargaining chip?
This is what they've been doing. So they've been doing a few things. One is they've been taking in and arresting many more Palestinians, mostly abducting them, to be quite honest, because they're held without charge, without trial. They've been going and trying to take more land in the Gaza Strip. And the third thing is increasing the military offensive and the attacks, particularly in places like the south and in the center as well.
All right. Diana Buttu, Palestinian lawyer, former legal advisor to the PLO, the Palestine Liberation Organization. Thank you so much for joining us in the studio for once.
My pleasure. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Make sure to subscribe to our channel to get the latest news from Al Jazeera.